I knew something was wrong the second the truck backed into my driveway. Not, maybe these guys cut corners, wrong. Not, cheap contractor energy, wrong. I mean the kind of wrong that makes the back of your neck tighten before your brain even catches up. The material pouring out of that truck wasn't black asphalt. It looked gray, chunky, like somebody had scooped up the aftermath of a building collapse and dumped it in front of my house. And the craziest part? The guy responsible for it was standing there smiling like he was doing me a favor. "Trust me, man," he said, hands in his pockets, expensive sunglasses, spotless work boots that had clearly never touched actual labor. "Once it compacts, it's gonna look beautiful." Yeah, beautiful. My driveway looked like a landfill got rolled flat by a steamroller. See, this whole thing started because my driveway was already a disaster. 20 years of Midwest winters had absolutely destroyed it. Cracks everywhere, potholes deep enough to lose a bicycle tire in, weeds growing through the seams like nature itself had given up on the thing. Every time it rained, water pooled right against the garage, and my HOA had already sent me 2 passive-aggressive violation letters with those fake polite phrases they love so much. Maintaining community standards, preserving neighborhood aesthetics, all that suburban dictatorship poetry. So I finally decided to replace it before winter hit again. I did what everybody does. I got multiple quotes. For companies came out, measured the driveway, nodded seriously, gave me numbers between 8 and 10 grand. Painful, but believable. Then came Silverline Surface Group. That was the company name at the time anyway. Turns out this guy changed names more often than oil filters. The owner, Derek Holloway, rolled up in a shiny black pickup truck with chrome rims and one of those confidence levels that instantly lowers your IQ if you listen too long. But I'll admit it, he was good. Friendly, calm, remembered my wife's name after hearing it once, talked like a guy who'd built half the county with his bare hands. He told me he was trying to establish roots in the neighborhood, said he'd cut me a deal for $6,500 if I agreed to let him put a small company sign near the curb for a week after completion. Now in hindsight, yeah, I know. The lesson here is if somebody's price comes in way lower than every legitimate contractor, there's usually a reason. And that reason is never generosity. But at the time, it sounded reasonable. He had a website, reviews, insurance paperwork, contractor license number, everything checked out, at least on the surface. So Wednesday morning, his crew shows up at 7 a.m. sharp. They tore out the old driveway fast, too. Almost suspiciously fast, like they wanted the point of no return locked in before I had time to think. By noon, the old asphalt was gone, hauled away in broken chunks. And that's when I noticed the new material sitting in the truck bed. It looked wrong. Not subtle wrong either. There were literal chunks of brick in it. Bits of concrete. Different colors mixed together like somebody blended construction debris into gravel soup. I walked over to one of the workers and asked him straight up, "What exactly is that?" The guy barely looked at me. "Recycled base mix," he muttered, cigarette hanging from his mouth, already shoveling it onto the ground. Then Derek came over smiling again. Talking fast, too fast. "It's eco-friendly material, state approved, actually stronger long-term because it compacts denser." That sentence alone should have won an Olympic medal in nonsense. But here's the psychological trap people don't talk about enough. Once your original driveway is demolished, your leverage disappears. That's the moment these guys know they own the situation. This is a psychological trap contractors rely on all the time. Because most homeowners panic at the idea of being left with a destroyed property halfway through a project. And Derek knew it. He could probably see the hesitation on my face because suddenly his tone shifted just a little, less charming, more impatient. "Listen," he said, lowering his sunglasses. "My guys are already here. We're already halfway done. If we stop now, you're still paying for demolition." So I let them continue. Big mistake. By sunset, the new driveway looked like somebody compressed a junkyard into a rectangle. The surface was uneven, pieces of debris stuck out everywhere, and when I walked across it, chunks actually shifted under my shoes. I remember just standing there staring at it while Derek slapped the side of his truck and went, "Looks solid to me." I actually laughed for a second because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Then came the invoice. $10,000 for $100. Not $6,500. Not even close. Apparently, there were now unexpected disposal fees, special recycled aggregate charges, and surface stabilization costs. He handed me the paper like this was all perfectly normal. I looked at him and said, "There's no way in hell I'm paying for this." And that's when his entire personality changed right in front of me. The smile vanished instantly. Gone. Like somebody flipped a switch. He stepped closer, voice low, aggressive now. "You signed a contract," he said, tapping the invoice with one finger. "People who don't pay me usually regret it." And right there, standing in front of my destroyed driveway covered in what looked like pulverized demolition waste, I realized I hadn't hired a contractor. I'd invited a predator onto my property. Now let me pause the story for a second, because this is the part most homeowners completely misunderstand until it happens to them. Guys like Derek don't survive off construction skills, they survive off pressure. That's the real business model. According to standard procedure, a legitimate paving contractor explains material specifications before installation, provides updated pricing in writing if costs change, and documents every stage of the project. That didn't happen here. Instead, Derek created what's basically a controlled panic environment. Tear out the old driveway fast, introduce confusion, then hit the homeowner with legal intimidation before they have time to think clearly. And trust me, the lien threat? That's the favorite weapon. From a legal perspective, a contractor's lien exists to protect companies that genuinely completed agreed-upon work and weren't paid fairly. The problem is shady contractors know most people hear the word lien and immediately imagine losing their house. That fear alone makes a lot of homeowners fold. They pay just to make the stress disappear. But here's where psychology gets ugly. This is a psychological trap called escalation commitment. Once people already spent money, time, and emotional energy, they become more likely to keep cooperating even when they know something feels wrong. It's the same reason scam victims keep sending money after the first payment. Nobody wants to admit they got played. And Derek understood another thing too. Suburban homeowners hate conflict, especially HOA neighborhoods. People will tolerate unbelievable nonsense just to avoid lawsuits, complaints, awkward neighbor conversations, or somebody putting a legal notice on their property records. Guys like him weaponize that social discomfort. The lesson here is simple. If a contractor pressures you to make immediate decisions after demolition begins, slows down when you ask technical questions, or suddenly changes pricing mid-project without written approval, stop everything immediately. Because once somebody uses urgency and fear instead of transparency, you're no longer dealing with a professional, you're dealing with damage control before the scam fully surfaces. 2 days later, the lien notice showed up taped to my front door like some kind of mafia warning. Bright legal language, bold numbers, official county stamp, the whole theatrical production. My wife looked at me like, "Please tell me this guy can't actually do this." And honestly, at that moment, I didn't know. That's what made it so effective. Fear fills in the blanks faster than facts ever can. Derek wasn't bluffing either. He officially filed a contractor's lien claiming I owed him the remaining balance for completed premium paving services. Premium. That word alone almost made me throw the paperwork across the kitchen. My driveway still looked like the aftermath of an earthquake. Every time a car rolled over it, loose fragments cracked and shifted underneath the tires. One corner had already started sinking near the garage. But according to Derek, this was apparently luxury craftsmanship. So I hired an attorney. And let me tell you something, the second a scammer realizes you stopped panicking and started documenting, the energy changes. Fast. My lawyer, Rachel Mercer, specialized in contractor fraud cases, calm woman, terrifyingly smart, the kind of person who could probably dismantle your entire life while sounding polite about it. She walked my property once, crouched down, picked up a loose chunk from the driveway, stared at it for maybe 3 seconds, and went, "Yeah, this is an asphalt." That sentence hit me harder than I expected, because until then, some small part of my brain still wanted to believe maybe this was just incompetence, laziness, cheap shortcuts. But fraud? Intentional fraud? That's different. That means somebody looked you directly in the eyes while planning to screw you over. Rachel immediately brought in an independent materials inspector named Carl Benton, retired civil engineer, looked like the human embodiment of black coffee and bad news. This guy spent 30 minutes examining the surface before he started laughing. Not normal laughing either, more like disappointed dad laughing. He kicked at the driveway with his boot, and pieces literally broke apart. "Cold patch composite," he muttered. "Probably mixed with recycled demolition fill." I asked him what that meant in normal human language. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "It means your driveway is basically garbage." Turns out Derek hadn't used hot mix asphalt at all. Real asphalt is heated, chemically bonded, designed to compact under high temperatures into a durable surface. What he dumped onto my property was temporary filler material normally used for emergency pothole repairs. Cheap, weak, not intended for full residential paving. According to Carl, the actual material cost for what Derek used was maybe $1,500 total. And somehow this idiot wanted over 10 grand for it. Rachel sent Derek a formal demand letter that same week. Either remove the material and repave the driveway correctly at his expense, or prepare for fraud litigation, breach of contract claims, and licensing complaints. Pretty straightforward. Derek responded exactly how narcissistic scammers always respond when cornered. He doubled down. No apology. No negotiation. Just more threats. He emailed Rachel saying the driveway met industry standards, accused us of trying to avoid payment, and warned he was prepared to defend his reputation aggressively. That line aged beautifully later, because while Rachel handled the legal side, I started digging into Derek himself. And once I started pulling that thread, the whole sweater unraveled. Silverline Surface Group wasn't even his original company. Before that, he operated as Apex Driveway Systems. Before that, Metro Pavement Experts. Before that, Blackstone Surface Solutions. Same business model every time. Low bids, fast demolition, junk materials, legal intimidation. Then once reviews piled up and lawsuits started circling, he dissolved the company and reopened under a new name. It was basically contractor reincarnation for sociopaths. I found complaint after complaint buried in local forums, BBB archives, county court records, elderly homeowners, single moms, retired couples. One guy said Derek paved his driveway right before a family funeral, then threatened legal action while they were literally burying a relative. Another woman claimed her driveway cracked apart within 3 weeks, and Derek blamed temperature fluctuations. Temperature fluctuations. Buddy, concrete doesn't spontaneously become oatmeal because October showed up. Eventually, I tracked down 13 other victims willing to speak openly. And once we started comparing paperwork, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Same contract wording, same recycled material excuses, same lien threats, same intimidation tactics. That's when things stopped being bad contractor drama and started looking like organized fraud. We compiled everything: photos, invoices, inspection reports, emails, recorded calls, and submitted it to the State Contractor Licensing Board and the Attorney General's office. At that point, I figured maybe they'd fine him, suspend his license for a while, slap his wrist, the usual bureaucratic disappointment package. Then the lab results came back, and suddenly this whole thing exploded into something way bigger than money. See, Carl had suggested testing the driveway material itself because he kept noticing strange fragments embedded throughout the mix. Tiny fibers, old insulation particles, crushed tile, stuff that shouldn't have been there. So samples got sent to an environmental lab. 3 days later, Rachel called me sounding genuinely disturbed. The material contained asbestos. Actual asbestos. For a second, I honestly thought she was exaggerating because asbestos felt like one of those old-timey industrial horror words you hear in documentaries about shipyards and factory workers from the 70s. But no. The demolition debris Derek used contained contaminated construction waste from older commercial teardown sites. The man had literally paved my property with toxic debris. Suddenly, the driveway itself became a hazardous site. EPA investigators arrived the next week wearing protective gear that looked wildly excessive until one of them explained airborne asbestos fibers can stay in your lungs permanently. My wife just stood there staring at the hazmat suits while quietly asking if we'd been breathing this stuff for days. And I'll be honest, that question hit harder than the fraud itself. Because now it wasn't about money anymore. Now it was personal. The EPA traced the material supplier to an unlicensed demolition recycling operation operating outside county regulations. Basically, these guys were taking contaminated debris that should have gone through specialized disposal procedures and illegally reselling it as recycled paving aggregate to cut costs. And Derek knew. That became the killing blow. Investigators recovered emails between Derek and the supplier discussing the contamination concerns directly. One message literally said, "Nobody's testing residential jobs anyway." Another joke that homeowners can't tell the difference once it's rolled flat. That sentence still makes my blood boil. From a legal perspective, this changed everything instantly. Fraud is bad enough. Environmental contamination? Different universe entirely. Once hazardous materials are knowingly distributed onto residential property, agencies stop treating you like a sketchy contractor and start treating you like a public safety threat. And Derek panicked. You could actually watch the confidence drain out of him in real time. First, he denied knowledge. Then he blamed suppliers. Then he claimed he was misinformed about material classification. At one point, he even tried arguing the asbestos concentration was within manageable levels, which is an absolutely incredible thing to say about poison you dumped onto somebody's home. Meanwhile, the EPA ordered full remediation of my driveway. Entire surface removal, hazard containment, specialized disposal crews, air quality monitoring. The bill alone was over $23,000. Then another $8,000 to finally repave the driveway correctly with actual asphalt. All charged back to Derek. And because investigators uncovered evidence of intentional misconduct, the Attorney General's office officially filed fraud and environmental violation charges against him. His contractor license got permanently revoked. The lien against my property was dismissed almost immediately. Then our civil lawsuit moved forward with enough evidence to absolutely vaporize him in court. I still remember seeing him during one hearing. Same guy who strutted around my driveway acting untouchable now looked exhausted, sweaty, tie crooked, constantly whispering to his attorney. At one point he glanced at me with this weird mixture of anger and disbelief, like he genuinely couldn't understand why I hadn't just paid and shut up like everybody else apparently did. That's the thing about predators, though. They mistake silence for weakness so often that resistance feels offensive to them. The final judgment hit him like a truck. $37,000 awarded for damages, legal costs, remediation complications, and emotional distress. Then came the regulatory penalties on top of that. State fines, environmental fines, civil penalties, business dissolution orders. He tried the classic escape route too, bankruptcy. Didn't work. Environmental penalties tied to fraudulent misconduct don't disappear that easily. Wage garnishment started. Assets got seized. Equipment auctions followed. His company accounts were frozen pending investigations tied to other victims. And then the media found the story. That was the moment his entire operation truly collapsed. Local reporters ran segments showing contaminated residential driveways across multiple counties. Helicopter footage. Interviews with homeowners. EPA statements. One headline literally called him the toxic asphalt contractor, which honestly sounds like a Batman villain who sells carcinogens instead of robbing banks. After the coverage aired, 8 more contaminated driveways were discovered connected to Derek's projects. Families had kids playing basketball on those surfaces. People pressure washed them, swept them, walked across them daily without knowing what was inside. All because one greedy idiot wanted higher profit margins. And the craziest part? This entire avalanche started because I refused to pay for a driveway that looked wrong.